I mean, Boris, it's not rocket science, is it? He suddenly he realised that, oh, wait a minute, I didn't cancel Christmas and I let everyone have New Year parties and I've gone 5 points up in the polls. Oh,
Well,
people
there
like
you
this.
go.
You know,
And,
pe
and it's absolutely refreshing to hear him finally acknowledging the devastating collateral damage that is done by lockdowns. And I think that in the last couple of weeks, really, I've noticed a distinct shift in terms of media commentary on this. I mean, talk radio has always been brilliant and has done so much to highlight the devastating impact of lockdowns, whether it's on children's education or NHS waiting times, on ordinary people's lives and the things that matter to them. But as you and I know, much of the rest of the media has thoroughly ignored that and has indeed sought to actually goad the government into more locking down, not less. And now I'm beginning to hear mainstream commentators actually flag up these issues that you and I and many others have been going on about for the last, well, nearly 2 years.
The disappointment with which certain news outlets, I'm talking about the BBC and Sky News especially, have greeted the obvious fact that Omicron, much to their fury, is not a devastatingly dangerous variant, but is actually quite mild and is turning out to be, just as it was in South Africa, the way out of this nightmare. It's palpable. I mean, they're furious about this, but even they are having to begin to accept that maybe this nightmare is nearly over. And if you follow the pattern of Omicron in South Africa, which is being replicated here in Britain, it does look as if Omicron will, after all, be our saviour.
So absolutely, and I thought that as soon as it really was becoming apparent that Omicron was nowhere near the terrible ogre that it was painted out to be. And you know, you'll remember when Chris Whitty, now Sir Chris Whitty, said that we don't know much about Omicron, but everything we know about it is bad.
Which wasn't true. It wasn't true.
It wasn't true at the time. It's certainly not true now. And it absolutely wasn't true at the time. What we knew about it then from South Africa is actually that it was quite mild. And so it proved. But I think there's a couple of caveats to those of us in danger of getting too optimistic. One is just the behavior of the public, as it were. And I was on Regent Street in central London today, near Oxford Circus. You know, as you know, a premier shopping area. It's a January sales, and it was eerily quiet.
Yeah.
I tweeted a video of it, and you know, I just found it kind of quite disturbing, actually. So people have got to realize that this is not, you know, the danger that many of them may fear it is. So we've got to get over all of that fear. And of course, the mandatory mask wearing on public transport and elsewhere isn't helpful to that. The other caveat is the sheer plethora of vested interests that are going to work very, very hard to keep this going as long as they can. Make no mistake, people have made a lot of money out of the coronavirus crisis. As many people who have devastatingly lost their businesses. At the same time, many others have cashed in very nicely, thank you very much. And they're not going to let this go as easily as you and I and many of your listeners would hope.
I agree with you. There is a certain suspicion that certain characters have been actively working to prolong this crisis. And
Sure.
The latest manifestation of that syndrome, to my mind, is this orgy of testing that we're going through right now. As long as millions and millions of healthy people every morning test themselves to see if they're healthy, and by definition you're going to get a number of these lateral flow tests with 2 lines, that means you've got 7 days off, then this crisis will continue, not because people are getting sick, but because they're testing positive, and that is insane.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this is an absolute nonsense, you know, and it's with the schools as well. You know, we get these edicts as parents that our children must take these lateral flow tests all the time. Sorry, I'm not doing it. You know, my children are not sick. They don't need to be tested all the time. It's misery having things shoved up their noses and at the back of their throats. And no, it's just a complete racket the whole testing thing. I mean, by all means, take tests, and you should take a test if you're feeling unwell. At least then you know your status, and it's the right thing to do to avoid passing it on to other people. But the idea that we're going to be going through mountains of lateral flow tests for the next year or however long, I think is just an awful thing, and should be thoroughly resisted. And I do wonder how long that kind of tail end of the virus effects is going to go on for. You know, you can slightly see that it may still be with us, this culture of testing, till the end of this year. I don't know, maybe longer. You hope not.
Well, that's the important thing that I think, Boris, if he's, I mean, I'm beginning to detect, surprisingly, in him an enthusiasm to get this thing over with. And if he's to succeed in that endeavour, he's going to have to work on recalibrating the mindset of politicians, but particularly the people. The government's got to persuade the people that it's time to get back to normal. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I wish they'd done that, you know, a very, very long time ago. You know, this is a problem entirely of their own making. They didn't need to terrify the population in the way that they did. They've also got to decide how long we're going to be going on to be subjected to these, frankly, pretty bullying campaigns to be jabbed every 3 or 4 months. And, you know, there are really big questions here. You know, they've sort of created a hell of a problem for themselves in terms of introducing the vaccine passports effectively. That's what we have for travel. It's not all Boris's fault. You know, these are the demands of other countries that we may all want to go to on holiday. But at what point do you sort of take your foot off the gas with all of these extra, quite unnecessary measures? And as you say, there's a real psychological shift necessary, and people do still look to Boris Johnson for leadership on this. We might consider that ridiculous, but it's important that the Prime Minister does put out a message to say, look, this thing is by and large over. He's going to have to choose his words carefully, of course, because if he says it's by and large over and then, you know, God forbid, some other genuinely very dangerous variant comes along, of course, he'll pay a heavy political price. So these are not always so very easy, these judgments, but he's got to do it.
But I do really, let's finish on an optimistic note. I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We get this right, maybe Definitely. It'll be over soon. Godspeed that. Thank you so much, Isabel. Lovely to talk to you.